Sampson, thank you for being here. This is episode 1 of what will be an ongoing series. We're going to name it Partnership Perspective and really bring in industry leaders to share thoughts and experiences around the sponsorship space holistically. When we thought about who would be the right individual to kick off this series, you were the first name that came to mind, really based on the type of experiences that you've had in this space and, again, the holistic story that you can tell based on the properties that you've been a part of. So thank you again for spending the time today. I know it's a Friday, so hopefully you're going to wrap up the day here shortly and enjoy some sunshine. But before we kind of kick things off and jump in, would love if you could provide a quick introduction as to who you are, where you've been, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, James, first and foremost, thank you for including me on this. My overall goal is for you to be able to make it to episode 2, so not to be so terrible during this conversation that you decide to scrap the entire series. So if we can do that, that will be a resounding success. But yeah, just as a quick introduction, Sampson, Yimer, I currently serve in a couple of capacities at an agency called Momentum Worldwide. I lead our sponsorship consulting discipline, where we help counsel our brand clients on the role of sponsorship within the broader marketing mix, and the types of investments they should be making, supporting them on negotiation, evaluation, and overall strategy efforts. I also serve as the Director of Diversity and Strategic Development, so I lead all of our diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and accessibility efforts for Momentum, from crafting the strategy and working with the necessary internal and external stakeholders to just to provide a more inclusive and supportive environment at Momentum Worldwide. But as you referenced, I've had a little bit of a non-traditional agency path. I've dabbled on the property side. I spent some time with the Atlanta Hawks, did a stint at what is now Learfield on the trademark licensing side of things, worked for Nielsen, which gave me a tremendous view and insight into the media landscape. Actually worked for a venture capital firm for a couple of years during the pandemic, which was, as you know, the best time to work in the investment space. Plenty of money. I say that in jest. And even did a stint as an adjunct professor during my time at the Hawks at Georgia State University, teaching sports law in a graduate sports administration program. So had a few different spots. I have a unique view on this industry.
I love it. And thank you for that quick intro. So Sampson, how would you describe the overall health of the sports industry at the moment? Are there any notable trends or challenges impacting the sector of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, obviously coming out of a generation-defining event, I think there were a lot of pending questions, specifically as it relates to the sponsorship industry. But I really do think that the global health of the business has never really been stronger. I think the market size of the business is expected to get to about $100 billion by 2030 with compound annual growth of about 8%, which is actually outpacing expectations as a lift from about the 6% projections that they had in the past. So if you really look at specifically the sports entertainment space, from a live event perspective, it really is kind of the last bastion of collective community viewing. And it's really one of the things that's underpinning the linear television market. So that opens up a lot of opportunities for brand sponsors to get on the biggest stages to connect with fans at the most emotionally resonant time. So I've never been more bullish, and obviously I wouldn't have a job if I weren't this bullish about it, but certainly the future's bright.
Which sports specifically have seen significant growth in sponsorship deals recently, and what factors do you believe have contributed to their success?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen tremendous amount of growth from a women's sports perspective. You look at some of the figures that have come out recently, whether it was the NCAA Women's National Basketball Championship, generating almost 10 million viewers on a broadcast network. You look at the Women's World Cup, it's obviously a massive global event going on. The USA-Netherlands match did about 8 million viewers across Fox and Telemundo. And the WNBA, which is up, I think, over 60% year over year on broadcast ratings in the midpoint of their season. So you look at some of the velocity that is coming across different areas of women's sports. That's an area that is poised for significant investment going forward. And in another area I think I'm really watching and paying attention to is the collegiate space. Obviously, name, image, and likeness has introduced a little bit of complexity in that space with the presence of things like collectives and the like. But if you look at the kind of the history of jurisprudence surrounding that space, obviously the Alston case, which opened up the ability for college athletes to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness, was a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court, which, as you know, in the U.S. almost never happens about any issue. So I say that to say what the future might hold for the determination of whether or not student athletes are employees or not. It's almost welcoming an additional challenge. I know there's a case working its way up through the lower courts called Johnson versus the NCAA, which asks that question as to whether or not under the Fair Labor Standards Act, student athletes are considered employees. Obviously, that has a tremendous impact on the economics of the space, but also opens up opportunity from a brand perspective. So those are two areas I'm keeping my eye on.
I know we touched on COVID a little bit at the top of the call. Obviously, it had dramatic effect on sports sponsorship. Are there any particular strategies or adaptations that sponsors and rights holders have adopted to really navigate what's been a really challenging time?
Yeah, and I think this was a trend that touched a lot of different areas, not just the sponsorship space. I mean, we're used to seeing what we call incremental innovation happening from a tech perspective. During COVID, we saw an acceleration of that, a digital transformation occurred, and we saw that become exponential innovation. So, when there were no live events happening, there were ways in which properties had to still engage with fans. There were ways in which brands still needed to connect with those fan bases. So you saw a lot of test and learns from a tech perspective, whether or not it's delving into things like the metaverse or purely digital experiences or leveraging historical IP. So I think that is a trend that is bound to stay here for the foreseeable future. And it's all really just accretive to what that fan experience looks like, whether or not it's in a particular venue or whether or not it's through a viewing experience. But overall, a brand and rights holder relationship is just like any other. It truly gets tested, and you really see the metal of it during the toughest of times. And coming out of that, I think we saw a little bit more transparency between both parties as it relates to making sure that we're deriving optimal value off of these deals. I think we'll see a bit more protective measures. I think everybody is probably sick of the force majeure language. If we never hear it again, I think it's probably never too soon. That being said, I do think it opens up some opportunities to protect both parties as it goes down from a contractual perspective, just to make sure that if we have any other generation defining events that put everything to a screeching halt, but we're equipped to handle it from a relationship perspective. But I do think it's made those relationships stronger.
What types of organizations are currently showing the most interest in sports sponsorship? Are there any emerging industries or sectors that are becoming increasingly involved?
Yeah, I think as we talk about a lot of the innovation that's happening from a fan experience perspective, it really broadens the aperture of the types of companies that you can see engaging in sponsorship because they can have that accretive impact to the experience. I mean, I think 5-10 years from now, there are companies and categories and industries that either don't exist or really in their nascency that we'll see ultimately entering into the space. But as that innovation occurs, obviously we've seen kind of the rise and fall of the crypto space in the sponsorship space. I think a good corollary for that previously was maybe the daily fantasy sports, the sports betting space. But all of those sorts of things from a gaming perspective, from a blockchain technology perspective, were really aimed at helping be beneficial to the fan experience. Then we'll start to see the next evolution and next iteration. But I really think the tech space, and obviously that's a very, very broad space to look at, but I really think that's what's poised to enter the sponsorship market.
How do you see the role of technology influencing sports sponsorships? Are there any innovative technological advancements that have changed the sponsorship landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we look at just a purely fan experience perspective, whether or not that's in the venue or from a media perspective, diving into things like AR and VR, we actually are invested in a company called the Famous Group that most notably has done a couple of different deployments with Carolina Panthers, with the augmented reality Panther that moves around the stadium before the game, with the Nickelodeon NFL playoff broadcast, in developing things like the Slide Monster. So you'll see that kind of different, more personalized alternative viewership experiences coming to bear. And you'll see that, I think whether or not you're talking about in venue or on from a broadcast perspective, it's really things that help broaden the different pathways of fans that connect with those properties themselves. But as we talked about, technology is just set to play such a massive role, whether or not it's from an infrastructure perspective, the telecom space, like a great client of ours in Verizon, in the payment space, as we see in just being able to manage ingress and egress into the venues from a safety perspective, leveraging technologies like generative AI to be able to get real-time feedback from consumers. So things of that nature. And another kind of interesting space that I'm seeing tested out with SailGP is DAOs, so decentralized autonomous organizations that are allowing fans to ultimately have an ownership stake in a SailGP team and make team decisions. And so I think we'll see a lot more of that, of technology leveraging the extent to which fans can have impact on the sport.
In what is really an increasingly competitive sponsorship market, in your current seat, what advice do you give to brands and properties to really stand out and secure the most lucrative agreements?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that we're entering the age where it's not necessarily a transactional strategic partnership that has a bunch of boilerplate assets associated with it. It really is more of a strategic partnership and a relationship. How can brands become endemic to the game day experience or match day experience from that perspective? I think also it's really having a holistic understanding of what the brand challenges are, what holistic factors are impacting the particular brand's industry at any given time, and how can investment in that property help alleviate some of those sorts of things. So we've seen a lot more personalization, and I do think as we talk about the acceleration of innovation, COVID did play a role in accelerating the strategic thinking that came along with partnerships. But that is a way to really differentiate yourself from a rights holder perspective. And really become attractive to brands as consumers ultimately change.
How are brands and rights holders addressing both social and environmental concerns in their sponsorship strategies? And do you anticipate these factors playing a larger role in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the prevailing trends that I'm very hyper focused on is the enormous wealth transfer, the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the world that's set to happen as the baby boomer demographic kind of exits the workplace, and you see a lot of that wealth getting transferred to Gen X or millennials or Gen Z, who are very hyper focused on what experts are calling conscious capitalism. So being mindful of where those dollars are spent in supporting companies, teams, brands that stand for something, and that can be from a sustainability perspective and a lot of ESG focused metrics. It could be from a DEBA perspective and making sure that companies are hyper focused on having a diverse and inclusive workforce. So I really do think that it's not, for years we viewed these as ethical imperatives that companies should focus on. I think we've seen that transition to now that they're focused on business imperatives, that there is actually legitimate business concerns tied to expanding their entry points into that space. So we're going to, it's here to stay is kind of a very short way of saying
that. From your perspective, Sampson, what are the key challenges facing rights holders in securing and maintaining valuable sponsorships?
Yeah, I think it's the attention economy. It used to be that you viewed the competitive set from a rights holder perspective to maybe other leagues or other teams in that market, but it's really just share of attention. It could be now Netflix or Disney Plus or Fortnite, or you insert additional activity here. The amount of content that is out there today has increased exponentially, but there's still 24 hours a day. As far as I know, I wish there could be maybe twice as much. I feel like it would be more productive, but it's a zero sum contemplation. So I really think it is adapting and evolving to be able to connect with, especially Gen Z consumers who studies have shown just don't consume content, don't consume sports content specifically in the same way. Their path to fandom might be much different than it was for myself, who, as you can see back here, from Kansas, huge Chiefs, huge Jayhawks fan, because I grew up in the area. The new generations don't necessarily have those same allegiances, or they might come, their pathway might come through a particular player and following their journey as things pass along. So really it is understanding and evolving consumer behavior.
Evolving is a great segue to my next question. And obviously we touched on social and environmental concerns kind of influencing strategy. We touched on technology. As we look kind of in the years ahead of us, how do you anticipate the future of sports sponsorship evolving?
Yeah, I think we'll see a greater convergence with sponsorship and media going forward. I think they're so inextricably linked as it stands now, and media is just such a big part of the ecosystem. So it really will be allowing brands to have impact across multiple different channels or platforms in the space, from the in-venue experience to digital social to whether or not it's an OTT or streaming platform or what have you. So I think you'll see a lot of convergence from that perspective. But sponsorship is always going to be a value to brands, because it's hard to imagine or envision the emotional highs or emotional lows in some cases that this industry provides. You can't replicate that really outside of anything else. So it's really just about being able to capture that more effectively, being able to tell a convincing story for brands and decision makers, and just being able to drive specific business impact based on what their objectives are.
Terrific. As we see kind of the world get a little smaller, what impact will the further globalization of sport have on sports sponsorship specifically?
Yeah, we're seeing it manifest itself kind of in real time as you look at a lot of the popularity of F1 in the US being driven by Drive to Survive on Netflix, and having more of those entrants into new markets that have picked up the sport, or the Premier League opening up an office in the US recently, or the NFL or NBA and Major League Baseball allowing their teams to be able to market in specific global markets. We're really looking at a circumstance where we might just have a more borderless commercial landscape that exists, which might not necessarily, which might eliminate the need for having things like marketing territory restrictions. I think we saw it start when the digital transformation took place, because it really just democratized fandom, because it allowed people to have access to it. We'll only see that increase. And with that will come new entrants into different regions that might not have been there in the past. You'll see probably some competitive considerations for a lot of brands, and how that manifests itself. From a more tactical perspective, is just making sure those lines of delineation are clearly carved out, that exclusivity and things like that are followed. But we're edging towards that idea of borderless, this borderless commercial landscape, which presents a lot of opportunity, but also comes with a few challenges as well.
Absolutely. Well, Sampson, listen, we can't thank you enough for spending some time with us on a Friday. I think it goes without saying that kind of the insights and perspective that you have and we're able to share are tremendous. And I have my fingers crossed. I think we're going to be in a good spot to get to episode 2 based on episode 1. I
love it. Thank you for the opportunity. And I know, you've been asking me a number of questions, but I'll turn the mic back, because I like the dialogue. So from your perspective, obviously you work with a number of different organizations from a partnership space in terms of background, skill set, all of the things that come into building a great sponsorship team. What sort of trends are you seeing in this space?
So the top 2 traits is we talk to clients about the types of talent they're looking to enter the organization. We really hear two main pieces of feedback. One is the majority, which is essentially plug and play options. Folks that have been in the space, have been successful at a high level, that can really enter their organization and hit the ground running. Traditionally, that's where we've spent a lot of time. As we kind of see the sponsorship space evolving, we've noticed a lot of talent in sports adjacent industries with non-traditional sports backgrounds that have interest in entering the sports space. And having been practitioners in the sports space at Turnkey, we truly understand the value that they can bring. So we spend a lot of time, especially on the front end of new processes with clients, really educating them to say, hey guys, we know traditionally these are the types of profiles we've looked to recruit. However, as we think about kind of the evolution of integrated assets, as we think about things like media, going and securing talent that have real strong expertise and relationships in the media space, but have never worked in sports isn't a negative. We really see that as a positive. And there's a number of successful examples of that. I can speak to one specifically at the LA Rams with Jen Prince being the chief commercial officer there. Her background was in media, hadn't spent time in sports, but the relationship she has, the level of expertise and insight she was able to bring to the organization has been huge for them. And so really the innovative organizations are really starting to see that trend and being receptive to that, and are seeing great success as a result. As recruiters and really being experts in the space, it's our job to really help educate clients that maybe aren't as receptive to looking at non-traditional backgrounds, the reasons why we think it's something that they should, and give them examples of some of the positive case studies that are out there.
Yeah, James, I completely agree. And one of the things that we as an organization look at when we're hiring is that level of either a diverse set of experiences or that sort of intellectual curiosity to want to understand the holistic sense of the ecosystem, how decisions from a sponsorship perspective might have impact in other areas of the business. And I think that helps not only our team understand our brand specific needs, but just industry specific trends and evolution. So it's a good thing, an exciting thing. And, it's you all are doing great work. So it's always good to have these conversations and get that perspective.
We appreciate the kind words, Sampson. And like I said, we can't thank you enough for spending some time today. I think this has been a great episode, and you've really set us on the right path. So thank you again. And
thank you. Appreciate it, James. We'll let round two. Hopefully this will set the bar for future conversations like this. But it was great. We'll have to do it again.
Terrific. Thank you, sir. Enjoy the weekend.